Hello everyone, welcome to this morning's episode. It's 6:17 a.m. and so the voice of man still lingers on a rock in the middle of nowhere. In tonight's episode, I would like to speak about advancing the inner realms of the species. And what that means is really that we human beings are not living one sort of life, but we have been conditioned to be under the assumption that we're just this one thing. Now, how do we introduce multidimensionality, or how has multidimensionality been perceived in the inner realms of man? What does it mean to have an inner life? What does it mean to have an outer life? The outer life is very evident. You see your outer life in the mirror. You see it in the reaction and reflection, in the impression that others have. Your outer life has an outer feedback. But your inner life, its feedback is your outer. It is how the outer is moving. And so what I mean by that is that I remember saying this sentence that was very nice. I said, I said, the worlds that live in the worlds we live in, and the worlds that live in us. And the mind is like potential energy, and the body is like kinetic energy. The physical dimension is like where the implementation, the action, the expression comes, and in some sense, the subjective realm, the outer realms is where the expression occurs. The inner realms is where the expression, you can say, on a more subtle level is happening. That means before I speak, there is a phenomenology going on behind my eyes. There's something occurring, and I feel it is like this for all of us, for all human beings, and it's just that we have been identified with strict forms, with strict formations, or how to be in a formation which isn't formation. So the information you attain in this life puts you in a certain formation. It's like the food that you consume gives you a certain state, puts you in a certain state. Now, when you look at all the human beings that have ever lived, from the stars to the shadows of society, you see that every person, I even consider every person I have seen in this life, walking in the street, that I felt I saw them, and the greater revelation was that I never could, that our eyes hold us in ways that others cannot see. And if they did, they would have our eyes, and we should probably freak out about being a clone at that point. So now when we bring up the concept advancement is a change with a direction where the direction of the advancement, it surpasses where you come and where you are, you can say. So when I think about an advanced civilization, I think about a civilization that is not just doing advanced external activities, but is also aware in advanced inner ways. Language has been the predominant technology that has moved our inner realms. When we look at stories of character, when we look at studying behavior, all of these go into pretty much the storification process and a sort of anthropomorphic intent of the mind. There is this concept of the flatlands. I heard it from Carl Sagan, to be honest. And the idea was very fascinating. And the idea isn't from Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan was relaying it, but the idea was this idea that imagine imagine a table, and the surface of that table is flatland. It's a land, it's a world where two-dimensional beings are living. Squares, triangles, circles, they're all living together. Okay? Now, one day, as a squirrel and a triangle and a circle have gathered around, they suddenly see a cube. They suddenly see a giant square appear out of nowhere, and they're all shocked. So the circle, the triangle, uh, the square, when they see this giant square appear out of nowhere, they feel it is divine. They feel it is the mystery of other dimensions. They feel it is aliens or something. You know. Now, what happens is they can't explain on that two-dimensional plane that actually somebody put a three-dimensional cube on the table on flatland. And when they put a three-dimensional cube, the two-dimensional beings only had access to the two-dimensional way, the square that came in flatland. So when we think of dimensions, even for the human being, I consider that our language, our inner technology actually sets the dimensions of our perception. Not that out there it's a sort of a stable thing. It's that we, as beings, it's not just the world that is moving our mind. It is our minds that also move the world. And there's a synchronization, or you can say a simultaneity, when this occurs. So you can say those two-dimensional beings, they couldn't see the cube. They couldn't fathom the third dimension. And we as human beings are here on this earth fighting over our truths. Imagine all the belief wars that have gone on through history. And right now, Mr. Within is saying, what if we don't see the higher dimensions that we have access to? So for me, it's like, all right, how do you advance a civilization? There's really two ways, externally and internally. And the external way will be best, most efficiently done if there's an internal awareness. That means you as a human being, do you do something well when you're comfortable, or do you do something well when you're uncomfortable? And when I say when you're uncomfortable, that means your attention, I feel, with any incident, anything that happens to you as a human being, the attention becomes fragmented. What that means is if I'm giving this talk right now, and suddenly I hear a noise outside of the window, and then my phone rings, and then I get Facebook notifications, or suddenly something, all these are fragmenting one beam of attention. It's as if the attention, it has to apply itself to all the dimensions of consideration. So for me, the study of the inner realms came into seeing what the outer realms were doing before I, as a sort of inner identity, had an opinion. So you got to kind of study life before you touch it, before you even attempt to contemplate it. That's a beauty to life, really, to see it before you define it. We are in a sort of situation where everybody has the same learn the same language in regards to being able to communicate, but at the same time, we want to also update the language. So how can you update the language if we've set it in stone? Pretty much the languages of the world are like statues. When I look at it, there should be new volumes of dictionaries coming out every year. Do you know new words should be constantly created, but the world has been kind of pushed back from its own creativity. The average person is more trying to survive in a system than to create a new system. The average man just wants to get by, but let me tell you something, guys. Whoever you are that is just trying to get by to the next day, is it enough? Is it enough to just endure with the presence of inefficiency? When will that majestic archetype find man where a roar of efficiency is heard all around the world, where suddenly our morality is not just based on our limited viewpoints. Our morality is based on the civilization that is in front of our eyes. And if your civilization is avoiding, if any time a civilization doesn't care for its members, what ends up happening is that the members don't care for the civilization, and the civilization slowly decays. Imagine a gym where there are many members of that gym, but the members of the gym don't care about putting back the weights they use. They don't care about uh, returning the space to the clarity it was. And so anytime you feel that there is hopelessness, there is an inevitability that what can you do? You're so small in a world so big. That is when your mind actually has been given the authorization to see the big and the small. In your weakest moment, in the darkest hour of night, the light emerges, the light dawn arises. And in the weakest moments of my life, I saw the strength of nature and my intuition, and I can say the logos in my inner realms was like, now you see that in your weakness, the only place is left, the only direction left is towards the strength. Really, that means I think people, if they saw the edge of their value system, they would understand that the limits are set by the being. How we advance the inner realms of the species is by finding the perfect synchronized balance between discipline and freedom. And freedom is actually rhythmic, it's a dynamic state, and discipline is valuing the static moments of your life. So anytime in my life, let's say I'm in a moment and there's so much complexity, the moment is literally like a complex moment, a lot of challenges or whatever, I quickly turn my inner realm simple. I literally have no opinion on complexity. It's kind of like meeting an alien and waiting for the alien to make the first move. You're just watching quietly. You're like, okay, the first move of this alien can suggest if it's peaceful or not. You know. So it's it's kind of similar that we have a free will. There's a jurisdiction, or your imagination to some degree is in the jurisdiction of your free will. That means you're freely choosing what clothing to wear, and believe it or not, the mind is freely choosing what ideas it wants to evoke and be animate in. Do you know? This notion that language is not us, but it is a simulation we're in. Because honestly, I'll say this, not a lot, when you look at ancient wisdom traditions, none of them were like, talk a lot and you'll get enlightened. They were all like going towards a renunciate approach. They were all pretty much like, life is a dream and truth is not, and we will in the dream do what is true. That has been the proper program. If mysticism was seen as a program, it was pretty much an animal who wanted to uncage themselves from the limitations of their inner realms that had made them acknowledge their objective being in a certain way. Now, spirituality, of course, if we could draw a graph, it's as if the person has been feeling more spiritual the more imagination has accelerated or has become more flexible. So what that means is there was a time where some people in ancient cultures, they would perceive invisible helpers in other dimensions. And when you look at the old world, the ancients of humanity, they had not rejected different dimensions yet. It's strange, you tend to think that the universe started from nothing and it became something. But when you look at history, you see back in the day, the world was way more multidimensional to people than now. So it's kind of like when you look at the Big Bang from a zero valuation, the value increased. okay? From a singular dimension, from the void, even from a singular, there came the multidimensional. But when you look at human culture, it was the multidimensional that came to singular. That means my ancestors believed that the gods were watching. And, some of my ancestors even believed they were the god watching. And so I can very easily say that language is a bridge between inner realms, but it is not the ultimate mountain peak. That the sooner our species can acknowledge the inner realms, can acknowledge the subjective realm, do you know what kind of freedom that would provide for cultural programs around the world? Can you imagine person A from one culture and person B from another culture? And let's say person A and B, their cultures have been at war. Now, person A and B, that means their cultural ethics has a different disposition. Literally, there are two different plants grown in a garden and they're fighting over space. You would see person A has the inner person A's inner realms are kind of like person A's inner realms and person B's inner realms, they differ. If they choose to treat each other as abstractions, there will be endless war, you know? But when they choose to see each other from an existential level, like when we compare experiences, of course, I'm having a different experience of this world compared to you. But when we look at it existentially, when we look at the value of existence, could you go to someone else and be like, yo, I'm existing better than you? You can't. You can't, because existence is one. It's like you can't, a tree exists as much as you. We are pretty much a complex relationship of matter with the space that it is held in. Now, Mr. Within is saying our consciousness, really, when we want to get into studying the soul, I think we have to reach a certain point where we wonder how much of it can have shape. Because everything we see, if you look at the idea of the soul, it pointed to the reverse of the temporary and the objectively known. So, in some sense, the idea of the soul for many people was the viewer, was the sight, was the field that was aware of the particles in it, was not the particle that thought it had a more mysterious particle in it. We are starting to see that it's as if all poets of the world have been antennas of humanity's future heartbeat. And that I find the body is going from the past to the future, but the mind is traveling from the future to the past. And it's an epic convergence of a field that is beyond time and a field that is not in time. And so right now I am speaking to you in the rooms and in the halls of the space-time continuum. That means when we come to study the dimension in a very secular way, all right, we got space and, things are moving forward, things are changing, so we got time too, but really the implication of being, the limits of being, how much only we as human beings are only looking for knowledge that relates to the human being, how much of the world is standing in ways that man will never see. And that is the fascination for the unknown. So when you want to advance a civilization, you got to go to its educational system and pretty much ask the educational system where knowledge is being received. And when we realize that we are kind of like antennas, that means the knowledge, it's kind of hilarious. It's like the teachers of all our educational systems have to be the students that enter it. That means the students should be the teachers, but it's the opposite. And eventually, I think in the future, there will be an educational system where it's as if the teachers become the students, and the students start teaching. And people are going to be like, what does that mean? The student doesn't know anything. What is the student going to teach? And that's the point. Because what we know, we already know. What we don't know is what fascinates us. I am telling you, just care for the unknown. It will change your life. We tend not to care for what we do not know, not knowing what was held in that. You know, there's this very profound story. This is kind of, it relates to the subtitle, the conscious opportunities, conscious opportunity. And what it is that there was this man who was sitting on this box and he was begging. He's like, please, people, help me. You know, and so as people are walking by, eventually there's this one kid, one sharp kid that comes there and he's like, hey man, have you looked underneath that box you're sitting under? And the guy's like, no, I've never actually. I didn't even realize it was a box. You know, and and the guy pulls up the box and sees there's a stack of cash. And then he's like, oh my God, what I was looking for, I was sitting under. I was sitting on. And that's the thing. That's why Rumi, this mystic in his poetry, he says, what you seek is seeking you. Or Meister Eckhart, this Christian Gnostic mystic from 1,000 years ago, he said, the same eyes I see God are the same eyes God sees me. There's a sort of relationship with any sort of animate potential. That means because there's the existence of a macrocosm, because Plato has said as above so below, it's kind of like every individual activity is also being owned by a collective activity. And I find this concept to be crucial because if we ignore how we're being collective, we're missing out on how we're being collective pretty much. We are reaching a point where cultural filters and nationalistic filters and ideological filters are breaking down. And what that means is I want you to imagine everyone has in some sense built a city of ideological truth behind their eyes. Certain ways, if they looked at a tree, it would have a certain value, as if that house was built that way in the city of the mind. And then you go see, for example, somebody who's a painter suddenly gets a paintbrush and it's as if like suddenly that's a skyscraper in the city of the mind. And so there's various ways. I'm just trying to say that reality really connects to everything else that is real. What has been separating reality, that means more than a bigger mystery than wondering if we're individually conscious beings or collectively conscious beings, is if we're beings at all or not. You know, that means when I look at the cells in my veins, I remember I was in Gerenzano, Italy. And I had come outside of a hotel kind of smoking that morning cigarette, and I was like, I had a coffee, a cappuccino, and I got the coffee and I went outside and I was looking at a fence. And I don't know why suddenly this idea arose to me that what if the cells in my veins, what if the cells in my heart, in my veins, and inside my body suddenly became conscious, developed their own technologies, language, mathematics, sciences, and then considered that the whole body isn't intelligent? What if the cells in my body felt they were in an empty universe? And so I would be like, whoa, I'm here, guys. And so it's kind of that, where I think the whole point of even the value in the concept of revelation in an agramic context is that it was as if God saw its creation going the wrong way. It's like, whoa, wrong direction, human being. Don't kill yourself. Love yourself. Yeah? Do you know something hilarious, guys? Do you know if there was an attempt to build an artificial civilization, every person would be comfortable because that civilization wouldn't touch their truth? But it wouldn't be the best civilization. The best civilization is, you know how you know a civilization is advanced or not? Based on the most immediate impressions a child that has entered that world of that civilization adopts. That means I think you can say from if you asked like a 7-year-old kid, how do you see the world? And that kid gave you some answers, or maybe even older. Let's say you asked an 11-year-old kid, how do you see the world? What that kid would say in regards to the dimension of human character, human nature, and even institutionalization of the further advancements of society, it's like that 11-year-old. I think the age 11 is a shamanic age. I think there's something about youth where the inner dimensions have not solidified yet. It's as if the young child's mind is imagination is like gas. The you know the older child's imagine. Let's say there's a young child, there's a middle child, and there's an older. So there's three kids, you know, and in age, you know. So in a hierarchy of age, so we see the youngest imagination is like gas. The middle kid's imagination is like liquid. He can understand the younger dimension and the older dimension, and the what do you call it? The oldest brother is like the solid state. And that's what I'm telling you. People don't realize, a lot of human beings don't realize, you can't live in life without like a statue being sculpted by the experiences you accumulate and attain. So pretty much, if a sculptor sculpts clay, or Michelangelo, this Italian sculptor, he would say, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. He saw a chunk of rock, he saw the angel inside it, and then he acted, and there, the angel was set free. The inner realm's form suddenly became visible in the external realm. So you see, there's something that it's like our experience of life is sculpting our meaning. And believe it or not, people think they have access to all their memories all the time. For me, it's memory is a luxury. Not that it's a luxury, it's a field. It's a field of projection. When you understand the inner realms are projected, and that's why I keep using the word evocational. You know, only one person so far in this lifetime has asked me why I use the word evocational. The reason is because it appears out of nowhere. Language is a picture that becomes real when we speak it. And that was, believe it or not, when you go look at the evolution of the ignorance of transcendental activity. That means, even though I'm sitting here speaking about other dimensions, guys, I'm telling you, I'm introducing dimensions to you in a certain way, and there have been many people in the world back in the day who, if I saw them, I would roar at them like a lion. I would scold them because and to some degree there was no choice. Sometimes when you look at history, as if it's a seed planted, and it's just like that's how the plant grew at that time in history, you know, and. What it is that language was magic. Did you not know? That children are taught spelling, they're being taught how to manipulate the image of the physical realm. And that is what speech is. And when you see, for example, if you were to consider two philosophers back in the day marching into the school of Athens, and it was a full room, everybody silently watching, and then as these two philosophers begin debating, suddenly it is as if like one inner realm is shouting what how the physical realm is, and the other is shouting. You know, and so that is something many people don't understand, that the art of debate especially is not personal too much, that it's just position based. That means people who debate, philosophers that debate, are pretty much acting as lawyers for certain subjective constitutions. You're defending thought from its future. Light is the beautiful. It is not what's in light is beautiful. A sunset is not just beautiful because it's just a spectrum of colors. It's like the sunset is beautiful because it is a conscious change. That's it. And I feel we have to start working our inner realms. I feel we're 8 billion creatures with advanced minds, but we're occupied and distracted by toys that won't get us too far. And believe it or not, there is something I have to say. It's like you can say modern spirituality will be cyberspace culture. Secular spirituality will be cyberspace culture. That means the questions that the mystics asked, sometimes some you would say some of the most intense spiritually minded people in our history, the questions they asked, like for example, how they saw things in the Upanishads and ancient scripture. Let me tell you, it was as if they were standing in a world where man wasn't the only thing in the room. And in modern society in 2020, everybody is being conditioned to think man is the only thing in the room. I wouldn't be surprised if a massive amount of the future generations are just going to be solipsists. That means they're going to think they only exist. They're going to think that it's only them here. They're going to think, imagine me and you, imagine, well, let me say it like this. I remember writing this very fascinating script, and by the way, anybody who is interested in producing movies, get in touch with me. But I remember writing this fascinating script, and I'll just tell you the general idea. These parents go in an accident and they can't come home. Pretty much, they're never coming home. And there's this kid that has put this young kid that somehow the parents were a bit careless, and this kid's put a virtual reality goggle on his eyes, and the kid's stuck in the virtual reality. Now the film starts off, with showing the parents passing away, but then you see the kid in the virtual reality. He's not a kid, he's a grown man with his wife and kids and family and all this in the virtual reality. Do you know? But in reality, he's like, I don't know, a young kid, kind of, pretty much his body is dying because he can't take off the goggles because he doesn't know how to from the inside. The program developers of the virtual reality goggles didn't make a simulation exit. Which, I don't know, this should probably be the most important law in passing virtual reality, that if you cannot exit the simulation from the inside, you shouldn't enter it from the beginning. Oof. Somebody in Silicon Valley, go shout this out at the world. That that virtual reality, and no virtual reality game should be made if you cannot turn it off from inside the virtual reality game. Cyberspace culture, pretty much the reason I say it's secular spirituality is because the ancient yogis, they thought this world was a dream, and if you're caught in a virtual reality, if you're caught in cyberspace, you're going to think everything's a simulation. So the same question, is life a dream, is life a video game, they're pretty much the same question. So what I'm noticing is that our ancestors were doing the same thing that our future grandkids will do, but in a different format. And so what it is as if life is living a life while we're alive. The universe is experiencing itself while we're experiencing ourselves. And I feel that we should reintroduce, the secular society should very compassionately, very like royalty, suddenly reintroduce and welcome the shaman, the Zen monk, the dervish, the rishi. We should pretty much rebuild a civilization that contextually has tolerance and conceptually is just advanced. I mean, I think it's it's a bit boring to repeat the day. Like, I found it very kind of strange, guys. You see in the movie, there was this TV show, which I actually, it was very well made, in my eyes at least. It was a smart TV show. It was the TV show called Lucifer. And this TV show, pretty much, it's the only TV show that makes you feel sorry for the devil. And in this TV show, pretty much, the archetype of darkness, which the archetype of darkness doesn't even believe he is, pretty much the devil is like a playboy nightclub owner who works with the police. Like that's it's just like such a creative idea when you think about it. But like the thing is, guys, in it they depicted hell as a loop, and a loop of your own guilt. And I was thinking, I was really philosophically, the cool thing about a philosopher is that a philosopher tends to have access to all dimensions because they're not going into the dimension to get defined. They're not going into the world to get something out of it. They're actually going in the world to see something new out of it. Attainments of the mind expand your vision. Attainments of the body expand what you can do with your vision. So this idea that hell was a loop, if you really think about our civilization repeating itself ridiculously, or in another way not updating itself, it's as if like when you don't update yourself, you're in hell. When life, who was it? There was this person who said this very important statement that when the mind, a habit is the decay of the mind. Habit is the decay of the mind. That means if the moment is not revealing something new, it is pretty much a loop. And this doesn't mean we all suddenly become obsessed with the new. It just means that life is a work of art in the making. And you choose with what intensity you draw each line. There have been moments where I have gone into a sort of hyper sensitivity in regards to drawing, where my hand, I was literally attempting to make my hand into a machine. So what I mean by that is like a person, when you write a sentence, you're writing it naturally, and if you're pay a lot of attention to writing, it's synchronized with the breath. What that means is when a person writes something, the intensity or the energy in their fingers for how intensely to move the pen on the paper is actually coming from their inhalation and exhalation, from that process, right? So if somebody wants to suddenly have the body act out like a machine, and what I mean by that is, for example, you want your hand to keep writing without you thinking about it. Think of it this way. You're not thinking about your heart for it to beat. It's already beating. You're not thinking about your lungs. They're just all the exhalation and inhalation naturally happens. What does that mean? That means when we look at the skill of a natural being, it is its nature. So the polymath approach was actually a return to the natural, to nature's genius. This is why Da Vinci said simplicity is the most ultimate sophistication. Da Vinci was a polymath. This dude drew with one hand and wrote with another. Like he literally wrote commentary on his left hand drawing, probably. You know what I mean? And pretty much the more you experience yourself as a field of intelligence, the more your intelligence is authorized to occur. The more you see yourself in a particular way as just a certain set of particles, then really you're bringing the void first. That means look for the full before you look for the empty. That's why nihilism is a trap, can be a trap. I say there's two traps in philosophy, the nihilistic trap and the enlightenment trap. The nihilistic trap is when you, in some sense, how can I tell you, you think everything is nothing. It's like you care for nothing. That's why you want nothing to exist. It's like nothing hasn't died in your eyes. So let me tell you, the nihilistic trap is reducing the value of this whole world to nothing. That's nothing. Like that's meaningless action. That's why it's a trap. It doesn't advance you in any way. And the enlightenment trap is different. It does advance you, the mere attempt of it, but the issue with the enlightenment trap is that the person is constantly looking for another location. Have you noticed, guys, in monotheistic traditions, religions, there is always a direction somewhere else. This is the enlightenment trap. When instead of handling the life you're given, you want to be given another life somewhere else. And that can be a massive delusion. That means the person didn't like where they are, so they're like, I'm just gonna, like an ostrich, put my head in the ground and just imagine I'm somewhere else. Like, it doesn't work that way. You have to care for objectivity. Regardless of how much you fly through your subjective realms, eventually, there's a law of balance. Your inner realms and outer realms are like the yin-yang symbol. I'm not joking. Everybody's mind is like a yin-yang symbol, and the secret is, if you stop moving and stop doing anything, just stillness and silence, your mind heals itself, your body heals itself. That's why fasting was also a way to health, back in the day at least, more commonly. So that's what I'm saying. There's something there. So these are all tangents and me still trying to explain that person A B thing, I think. Person A has a sort of inner realm. Person B has their own inner realm. If you try to force the outer world to look like your inner realm, realistically, it won't 100%, and you will always be disappointed. So for me, those people who suffer are those who are disappointed. They're disappointed by their own performance. That's why you suffer, because you feel you can't do anything else. And this doesn't mean we cannot, the human being shouldn't, like, there's no pain in life. This doesn't mean that it's not a battlefield. It's all a playground of happiness behind our eyes. It's not. This life is so alive that I'm saying, if someone was to ask me, hey, Mr. Within, what's happening in this world? I'll be like, it's unknown, man. It's unknown. It's so unknown that our knowledge evolves. The evolution of a knowledge is a testament to the presence of an unknown dimension. That means man's knowledge is cute. All knowledge, all books ever written they're cute. Because what is the seriousness of it is the direct experience. And I feel people in their communication are constantly trying to find themselves in a role. Like this is definitely good for another talk. Like a totally different talk can be given on this, but this notion that when the sun comes out, the light is in your eyes. Do you know too much doubt is unnatural? There was probably a moment in René Descartes. Descartes, he's this French philosopher. He's also, in a strange way, the father of modern science, to some degree. For example, in mathematics, the Cartesian plane, this dude came up with it. René Descartes came up with the Cartesian plane. So René Descartes, his approach was a methodical doubt. He pretty much was doubting everything. He's like, I'm going to doubt this, I'm going to doubt this. His friends came to him. He's like, I'm even doubting you guys, And they're like, why? Why, René? Why? Why are you doubting us? We're your friends. And he's like, because I'm doubting everything. But anyways, so René Descartes, he had this methodical doubt, and he came to the conclusion that one thing he couldn't doubt was, in another sense, the doubter, the isolated thinking subject. Now, I would say, hey, René, I would say, probably that the thing is that if you doubt everything all the time, you are being an unnatural seeker. This is why they say laughter is medicine. Because it brings you back to your natural resonance. You're like a tuning fork that calms down when you laugh. The inner realm, suddenly there's release. So, to doubt the doubter means non existence. And Rene Descartes understood that if he was to doubt the doubter, his effort would be in vain. So the conclusion of the search had nowhere to go other than being the isolated thinking subject. There's a story ascribed to Rene Descartes, which I don't know how authenticated it is, but I heard it from a scholar named Terence McKenna. And he said that there was a kid in a barracks, like this 28-year-old man who, and back in the day, it was normal for people to become soldiers. Like that was the work to do. That was the most advanced work you could do back in the day, was be a warrior. You know, it's like how parents want their kids to be doctors and engineers. Back in the day, the parents wanted the kids to be warriors, great warriors. It's like the mother would come back in the day and look at the father and be like, all right, we need to find a private barbarian tutor for our son. To teach him barbarian like killing, you know, to survive in this medieval world. Can you imagine? Why have our ancestors, why were they drawn toward liberty? Why were they drawn towards freedom? Why were they drawn towards equality? What was the advantage? I think we're lucky that we're not purely rational creatures, or we would heartlessly destroy the world. Man is destroying the world in a strange sense, in a cultural, social sense, but he is at the same time caring for what he's destroying. It's like you're not full like a robot. Do you know you're a human being? That means your subconscious mind has ascended into manifestation from various how can I tell you? Your conscious mind has ascended from various subconscious realms that you might not believe it, but at the edge of your imagination, you are the world itself. At the edge of the conceptual entity, there is the simultaneity of the presence of the whole world. You know, I feel that people feel that we are a sort of container, and when the person passes away, transitions out of this physical life, this container breaks, like you drop the jar. You know, human life is gone. But then you see, what if this container, it's like gas in a balloon? And when the balloon pops, this gas is no longer bound to the limits. So it's kind of like a coin flip, I find, for us to truly see if we are just temporary bodies or we are eternal minds. I feel it's a coin flip. I feel no human being can know. Because if you consider the hollowness of language, it's self-imposition. We're imposing the self into motion. Pretty much when a person starts the day, they are setting a self into motion. You're literally like throwing a bowling ball to go on throughout the day. I think a shamanic relationship with self would be one where there's an inseparability between the individual activity and the cosmic activity. As Swami Krishnananda very well pointed out, that he said religion is God remembering himself. You know what that means? That means from a Vedic standpoint, there has never been people, there has only been the truth in various forms. And when you look at it from the monotheistic path, it's also there is only one truth, everything is God's will, and man, he cannot even fathom it. That means language is denied access to higher dimensions, even though we require to use it as a key to higher dimensions, if there are any. Because Fermi's paradox can be applied to a lot of things. It's not just where are the aliens, it's like where are the other dimensions? So man, the human species, one of the coolest things it can do is start studying subjectivity. Start studying how you're a subject. You got to do your own research. This is the cool part of life. This is something where it's an art that it's pretty much nowadays it's a lost technology. But I remember kind of looking at the lives of various rock stars and musicians, just interviews they've had, on YouTube. And I wondered about even not them, just various writers. Like, why is it that we don't find writers like Charles Bukowski anymore? Because people are scared of their own voice, so they never get to know it. And what does that mean? That means the art of discovering your original nature has been faded to some degree. That means we haven't lost the mirror where we can see our body in, but it seems we have lost the mirror that we could see our mind. And let me tell you, life is a creative process. It's not just created particles. The particles are not just doing nothing. Your particles are employed by your free will. All the particles that constitute you as a being. That means these words that I'm saying, they come from a sort of space of freedom, and it doesn't mean that freedom is endless. It just means like I've seen the colors that a certain picture can be drawn with, and I attempted in these thoughts. So the question must come. Before we want to advance the whole species, we have to consider how do the individuals advance. Now, when we look at individual advancement, the person has free will and choice. Now, there's something remarkable about this. That means we can instantly change our view or access a new viewpoint in regards to our inner realm. So the issue is we don't need to have every person trying to just fix themselves. Because people have a choice, because the inner realms are evocational, that means if you are in a new room, you're going to be a new self. If you enter a room you've never been into, it's as if you are experiencing a self you could never see. So I thought that really the solution is simpler. The solution is much more simpler than 8 billion beings picking up trash. It's simpler. It's that we have to create a civilization where the future generations don't dare to throw trash on the ground. You know why? Because they are trying to build the most advanced Earth. The most advanced civilization. It's as if, how can you? How can you kind of bring shame to the only civilization you're a part of? And the greatest shame that one can bring in the lifetime is not attempting to live in this system, to avoid it, to run away from it. The religions give you a reason to run away into heaven, guys. Don't worry about this world, you know. The enlightenment tells you run away into a different, state of self. So many paths are making us turn our head away from a science project that after 4 billion years we're the only ones who can attend to. And the less we care, the sooner the memory will fade, and that is the first extinction that will hit man. The failure to see the possibility of it enduring longer. That means the moment in your life you have failed to see a self that has not failed, you have failed. I remember there's a poem, I wish I knew what number it was. I've written a lot, but I'll tell you, the poem was so profound. And the poem, oh gosh, I can't remember in which volume it is, but I'll tell you. Pretty much, I'm a very, I'm conscious of language, sensitive to a language as a person, just to a certain degree, a language of my inner realm. So pretty much I had written this poem that my grandfather had asked me, what are you doing with your life, and I remember in the poem I had given an answer of not me. It was a poem. Like I had kind of given an answer to my as a different archetype in the poem. But pretty much in the poem I'll tell you. So it's a poem of this. Here, I'll just say it in third person, and maybe it's easier. I wrote this poem where there's this kid where his grandfather comes and asks him, what are you doing with your life? Something. But I remember all of this was written in a certain poetic form. And the kid tells his grandfather, what is life? I'm just a traveler in this world. I'm just traveling. How can you ask a traveler what the destination is in a world so big? And at the end of the poem, I think I did something very unique in literature, where how can I tell you? It was like I gave a real ending to a fictional situation. And the real ending of it was that I finished the sentence off. It was then like my grandfather said, you have failed. And it was like, why is just awareness a failure if the self doesn't live? So we have to literally change the blueprint of our civilization in a one where the future generations can't wait to be born. People in this society, civilization 1.0, there's so much suffering and inefficiency. People, believe it or not, can't wait to exit. But there's going to be a civilization 2.0 where people can't wait to be born to one of the most advanced places this universal sector provides. In my science fiction novel, I had spoken about star beings who one of their parents was an extraterrestrial. And then I had even spoken about star-minded beings, where their mind was not, they were purely human, but their mind was in a different rhythm. Your sense of self is the center of gravity for your beliefs. And when you realize your sense of self is an unknown dynamic witness through the contents of the moment, pretty much you're your whole moment. That's your soul. Your soul is your whole moment of being. Majestically unknown. And I think I'm one of those rare people in history who's found a way to say a lot about the unknown. Because it is the eye of knowledge. We must. Terence McKenna tells us a culture evolves as fast as its language does, and we have to attempt to change the language of the world by staying true to our own experiences. And then, once you revert to your true nature, you will find the simplicity to the rhythms of your own intelligence that authorize your original nature. So, you see, the thing is not that people have to find truth, people see are in the presence of truth. It's more about kind of before you move your body, there is an choice. The free will is choosing the intensity of the movement. It is not choosing where it's moving. Or even if it attempts to choose where it's moving, it would just be a joy of the subject. It would be a value of the subjective realms. That means a lot of these ideas, if I don't speak about it, it's as if they have never existed. Because we have to keep the world healthy in the eyes of the world. There's a responsibility that comes from the moment you communicate. And that responsibility is the beginning of the walk of your inner realms into the outer. Think of it this way. You have one opportunity, one lifetime, to actually see what you are. Like, look at what the scientist is telling us. Look at the experiment, do the experiment from the beginning. Look at the actual phenomena that is there, then experiment. Put the beliefs, make the beliefs secondary. Put the beliefs in the passenger seat and have direct experience there. But when you go and look at the direct experience is not the phenomena. It is the phenomena's reception, which is process-like. So you know what's happening? We are realizing the mind and the world are the same moment. And that's when the veil of thought is conceptually removed. You literally start looking at life and this strange kind of blissful gentleness finds you. Let me tell you why. You find this gentleness because your subconscious resistance to what the world should be like is gone. You start actually existing like a natural being. It's a symbiosis right now. The average human mind is like the liquid state. You know, it's like the middle brother. He can see the younger brother and can see the older brother. You know? It's like we have a digital, very specific kind of civilizations style kind of approach, and then there is a nature, which really, like, who can define nature? It's happening at once. It's like, what do you want me to say? You know, it's like trying to describe a person, but only describing one part of one dimension of them. Language should be treated playfully. And when the world forgets that, political correctness choose the legs of the chairs of civilization. Hopefully there will come a time where in politics, right now, you know, it's like we're still in the pioneering phase of the greatest political systems that will ever be known to man. You know, right now we're in the rough phase of political evolution. We have not seen the greatest, and it's a good sign. It's like when you get the bad news first, the good news is only left. You know, when you get the good news first, only the bad news is left. You know, so I'm telling you, confront the bad news instantly. Confront the challenges of your life instantly. The whole point of being even given a mind is that you can do something about your moment. environment. Many species in nature can't. They're bound to their ecosystem. They're bound to their instincts. They are still in living life as animals. But how is it that we stood on our 2 feet and we wore suits and ties in front of the mirror, and we got on hyperloops and we went to work? So it would be a situation where evolution becomes collectivized. It becomes a network. Man remembers how his mind is living with the universe. And the origin of true style comes when you have actually been rejected let me say it like this. Let me actually rephrase that. When you have been banished from every thought you have ever known, and then you come into a state of mind where you feel you have no choice but to walk anew. And that moment of walking anew is the greatest, most advanced state of mind ever. There is nothing more divine than, in some sense, novelty's remembrance. That you remember the new is standing. That means there is chaos as a member of civilization. There's order as a member of civilization. But chaos and order are realizing there's another. And that other is novelty. Novelty is standing in the civilization. And novelty is the greatest guardian. That means what is guarding human beings from their past is their future. Do you know? And hope is strange. It's like the hand of your future self angelically pulling you out of the ruts of your your limited self-belief. At least I've experienced that in my inner life. What if the future is not a self, it's a world? What if in the future ourselves are the whole world? What if we're evolving from an objective particle into a known objective particle into an unknown collective field? What if? How would that influence all the ways that people have been speaking about psychology, consciousness, its projective experience of existence? There's this story of the son of a carpenter that one day suddenly gets this memory, gets this vision in his mind that he's a Shaolin monk. And this young kid back in the day goes to his carpenter father who's trying to build like the Noah's Ark of tables, And he comes to his father, this carpenter's son, and says, "Dad, I honor what you do, but I am not born to be a carpenter. I'm born to be a Shaolin monk. I want to go to Shaolin monk school." And his father's like, "Son, well, your grandfather was a carpenter. I'm a carpenter. Your grandfather was a carpenter. Probably the grandfather of your grandfather was also a carpenter. Are you sure, son?" And the kid's like, "Yeah, Dad, I don't want to just, kill trees all day." It's like, oh, shit. The father's like, "All right, son, you don't have to kill trees anymore." Or actually, a carpenter wouldn't technically need to cut the tree. I don't know, maybe back in the day they had to. But anyways. So the father's like, "All right, son, that's a very strange thing to say that you want to be a Shaolin monk." And the father thinks, and he's like, "Okay, can I imagine myself having a Shaolin monk son? Like, how badass would that be?" And the father, oh man, hopefully I can get through the story without making it too silly. Anyway. Oh man, that's what happens when you laugh on an exhale. The kid and the father find themselves in front of a Shaolin monk school, and somehow, coincidentally, the headmaster had decided to walk towards the center of the school to just check out and see what the gate looks like, you know? And so the Shaolin headmaster suddenly sees the father and the son, and the son, before the father and the Shaolin headmaster they speak, the son just runs to the Shaolin headmaster, bows, and says, "Please grant me access." Like something like, "Please grant me access to the Shaolin monk school," you know? And he shows some loyalty and respect. And the Shaolin monk headmaster looks at the father, and they're both smiling, kind of like, okay, this kid's taking this too seriously. You. But the Shaolin monk says, "Yes, you're welcome. Go quickly. Run into go into the headmaster's, inside the gates and wait for me." Something like that. So what happens is that the father and the headmaster talk, and the headmaster's like, "Yeah, don't worry, man. Your kid's gonna get Shaolin monk soon." And the father's like, sees that the person is a decent person, and it goes. Now, what happens is this kid, for many years, he trains with the rest of the crowd, with all the students in the monk school, but suddenly, after some point, the headmaster gets an intuitive vision as if there's something important that needs to happen for this kid's teaching. So he goes up to the kid and says, "From now on, you have to sit in a room with buckets of water, like a bucket of water, like a big bucket of water, and literally hit with the palm of your hands the surface of this water endlessly." And the kid's like, "Is this some sort of punishment?" And the headmaster's like, "No questions." And what happens is the kid continues. The kid, every day, he's forced to slap water, and he looks at all his friends who are learning different martial art techniques, and he's pretty much learning nothing. He's just slapping water. And after some point, he has so many thoughts, and he's continuously repeating the action, that at some point, he's not repeating the action. He doesn't have thoughts anymore. He doesn't have an opinion on what he's doing. He's just doing the work as the work, you know? And many years go by, he's upset. There's been even times where he rebels, and he's like, "Sir, what is this? This is unacceptable. I deserve more." This is definitely not like what a Shaolin monk should be doing. And so the headmaster says, "No, keep going." Now, eventually they get their Shaolin monk sabbatical. And they all get to go to their families. And so he's walking back kind of disappointed that how he spent the last couple of years kind of like just, like for a long time just hitting water in a bucket. Maybe like a year. I think a couple of years would be insane. But like a year could be like trying to break a record with a healthy mentality. Now, what happens is that the kid goes back, and suddenly, the father opens the door. So, guys, this is a Shaolin monk story I'm sharing right now. The kid goes back, and he knocks, and the door opens, and his father's there. And the father gets suddenly teary-eyed, and he's like, "My Shaolin monk son has returned. And they set up the table, and even the second oldest brother is even there. It's a giant family, and that table his father was working on is now in their living room, and it's this giant table. And so the father says, "Son, sit at the front of the table. You've returned from Shaolin monk school." And so the kid comes in, and he's like, "Thanks, Dad," and he sits there, and he's just he has this anxiety that if his father asks him, "What did you learn?" he's gonna be like, I just spent just slapping, water in a bucket." The father looks at him and says, "Son," he asks the question. And he says, "Son, you have returned from a Shaolin monk school. Tell us, reveal to us the secrets of the Shaolin monk. At least, like, tell your family what's up, you know." And so, in that moment, the kid, he suddenly, in his mind, in his inner realms, gets this anger, as if he failed, you know. And so he's instantly in that moment slams. You know how a person gets angry when they're sitting at a chair at a table? They suddenly slap the table and get up, you know? So before he can say, "I didn't learn anything," you know, before he goes into a chaotic archetype, he slams the table. And the table, that chunk of the table, like the other parts of the table are not affected, that chunk of the table just breaks apart. And his father gets shocked. Everybody gets shocked, and it's as if he had all those years of slapping that water on the surface, in that bucket, on the surface of the water in that bucket, and cultivated a level of ability and skill like unimaginable. And in its time, it appeared. And so, guys, it's on some level, I'm just a person sharing ideas, but on another level, I can see that we're all part of a system, a system that is older than we are, but also wiser in order. If it's like wisdom plus novelty equals advanced civilization. Wisdom is caring to see what is here. Novelty is caring to advance what is here. You know. I'm pretty much thinking that how do the minds of people advance into the future? And I feel that there is, we need much more, a further kind of exploration as a species of our inner realms and to establish a new relationship with language through new experience. Because there's always an option. You either keep the past satisfied or you keep the future satisfied. If you live for the past, you in some sense, sure, the past will clap for you, but the future will see your hollowness. And if you live for the future, you in some sense see that the past will see your hollowness. Because the whole point of the future is that it's the new, it's the introduction of the new experience. So an advanced civilization would be a totally new experience of civilization, an experience of civilization in an advanced way. And this goes through the crossroads of a digital means, the cyberspace culture that will probably, like, I don't know, in 100 years appear, where children may start behaving in ways where it's as if they're not certain of their simulated perception, you know. And also the advancement in our inner technologies. Like, I feel the evolution beyond language, if you were going to ask this question, like, all right, the Homo sapien, how does it evolve beyond language? It would evolve into what I feel silent fields of knowing. Because the reason we speak is because we don't know each other's inner realms. We have to speak, we have to communicate. So imagine a state where the being is not local to the body, they have become their whole moment. So imagine a bunch of drops suddenly merging into becoming like an ocean. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope this episode was helpful. Um, Anything we don't care about pretty much leaves consciousness. And to care about evolution and novelty means that your consciousness becomes the freedom of the new rather than the chains of the past. I think there's always a greater value in a new action than a repeated action in some sense. Like novelty is uh, the greatest color the world can be painted in. The endless color. You'll never know its color. We'll never know how advanced civilization is because the extreme is the edge of the process. Is like the foot on the gas pedal. That speed is the consequences become unfathomable as you increase the speed of a system. So when we can have an ability to see that our inner realms, they are not meant to be the same, but our outer realms, we find ourselves existentially in this space, you know. Ultimately, guys, I can tell you the way I've kind of given it language is that my viewpoint is that there's something called the language threshold, and I treat language not as me. I am never, like, I don't feel we're thoughts. I think that is a massive delusion. That a person thinking they're a thought when thoughts come and go, you know? So a static belief on a dynamic process is weird. That's why you can't believe experience too much. It's just the experience is happening instead of needing the indirect language. So what I'm saying is my whole philosophy, you can say Mr. Within's philosophy on language is that language cannot contain truth. Language is a finger pointing to the inner experience, which on some level is never, you can't communicate an experience. Like you can say something about skydiving, but you can't share the whole emotion of that experience. You know what I mean? Like, there are certain limits to things. So I would say that I think my talks kind of fall more on the continental philosopher side. I see language as where the mind of the human being is taking shape, and in each word there's a world. Believe it or not, that's the easiest way to learn things. It's like watching a movie. It's not like, at least that's how it transformed for me. It was like becoming actually curious, and it's a mystery for yourself to wonder what is going on, and then you learn everything in your moment. So for me, it's as if just like there's no way a person has access to the whole world to even ask a question that is an answer that can be given an answer to the whole world. It's like I have access to my world. How my sphere of sensory perception is being processed into some sort of subjective um, person. So it's just these are just deep talks on consciousness. That's what they are really. Like we're trying to look at consciousness, concentrate on it a little bit more as a species, I think. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. And a great way to advance the inner realms is to write. I recommend everyone to go buy a stack of printer paper, especially in 2020 where there's this whole virus situation happening. So it's as if like buy printer paper, put it on a table, and only pick up and put a pen on the paper and treat that piece of paper and what do you call it? Just get a stack of printer paper, put a pen on it, put it on a table you pass by often, let's say, and only pick up the pen when you get an idea that if you didn't write it down, you would miss out. You would miss that idea. Only pick up that pen when an idea is too important or too unique to not to let it slip. Do you know? Because people don't have a sort of cultivation mentality in modern society. It's like we let go of a lot of valuable things in our inner realms. I was in like a science fiction work of mine. I kind of wrote, like I've written a lot of ideas on what future society of technologies may look like, you know. And so one vision I had is right now people are holding phones in their hand. Okay, I thought what would be like a couple chess moves ahead of this? How would it evolve into? You know? And then I saw in the future there are these small spheres that are hovering in the air, and these spheres are recording everything, and they are pretty much our Jarvis from like the Avenger movie. They are these spheres are like you can say even like children can walk in dangerous places, and this sphere is a surveillance. Imagine even a shield, even if it becomes super advanced. So what I'm saying is, it's like the phones are in our hands. Instead of taking our phones inside our brains, we're gonna first take it outside. Like imagine your technology wasn't near you; it was just orbiting in the air as this small sphere, like 2 meters in the air. And anything you wanted, you're like, call this. Suddenly, like a 3D hologram of that person would appear. Like it would be like a unique sphere hovering everywhere, where it's pretty much your modern phone, your future phone. Your body doesn't need to have any technology connected to it, you know? Because there's something important about clothing and how it's so easy to wear clothing, but in the future it might not be so easy to transform or connect the human biology to a machine. You see, it's as if we have moved past the era of wondering about the spirit in the machine, you know, now we're wondering about how kind of like the machine can create the spirit. And that would be I think, literally the studies that programming engineers have to do. They have to there's so much wealth in human behavior. So many unknown patterns throughout the day appear from as an old system entering a new condition. So breaking chains. You say in the chat section similar to how Alan Watts says confusing the menu with the dinner. Yeah. I say it in this way, where there's an inner realm and an outer realm. If you literally look at your moment, there's like the objective component, which is like the room you're in, where you physically are. And then there is all your opinions and beliefs and memories and visualizations and whatever, which is the subjective realm. So I'm just saying we're not even the subjective realm, because it changes. Because when you look at the human body, it's not the same human body. It's like you don't have the same physical body. Your cells have changed. The cells of your physical body have changed throughout the years. Your ideology through all the different experiences you've had throughout the years have changed you as well. So we can say we're neither the ideas we have on ourselves and we're neither this physical body, but we are their change. We are the presence of the witness of the change of objective phenomena and subjective phenomena. You cannot hide the eyes of the future generations from danger. No man can. It's just that chaos and order, they can be consciously accessed or they can be unconsciously accessed. And when you acknowledge it, when conscious access is another way of saying when you walk into the dark, when you walk into the darkness, there is a light like the yin yang symbol that is, it's like you're the light when you walk in the darkness, you're the darkness when you walk in the light. It becomes that sort of, you can say, psychological ambience to the inner realm. I think we have to encourage the civilization to no longer just be hunter-gatherer style like in the outer realms. We're right now the hunter-gatherers of information. When you look at YouTube, all these people sharing content, what are they? They're hunter-gatherers. You know, they're looking for ideas to bring to the in front of the camera. So why is this urge there? Because a lot of the world has not been seen by the world. And the internet, believe it or not, is a recent development. So we still have and the explorer's spirit is still alive. If we were to connect our head to AI or to the internet or whatever in the future, that would mean exploration would just be waiting for indexing to happen. So there would be no exploration. So we have to keep exploration as the pillar of civilization that has to be preserved. That means whether you're an evil person or a good person, you have to defend this value that is a pillar of your civilization, okay, which is the granting exploration. Any system, pretty much any institution or any room you enter where there is not freedom to move in and out of the room, that room has confusions, has internal confusions. That means it's a strange irony, but the oldest people manufacture the goods for the simple youth. You know, we have still not evolved to a level where you see, we still are obsessed with selfhood. That's why we don't care for the civilization, which is a value greater than yourself. That means the whole point of human living in an intellectual approach, I think, is just to keep the efficient alive as long as we can, and that's it. There's so many variables to life that are suddenly they will make your consciousness feel unconditional to that condition. You know, the person thinks everything is okay and then sees it's not, but then sees it is. And the mind lives its life as the body does. I think Civilization 2.0, it has one slogan: rise, mankind, rise. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a great day.